we'll go ahead and get started. Is it just turning it down good enough? I'll hold it so it doesn't maybe help. All right. Just a couple announcements as before we have our speakers go. Our next meeting is October 17th. We have not determined the location yet or the topic. So if you have any topics that you want us to share on or have somebody present on or whatever, let us know. Or we'll find something and pick that. For those that may not know, our off meetings, so the non-quarter ends, so September and then December are quarter ends. But so our next two are whiteboarding meetings or open discussion. So if you have a project or something you're working on and you want your feedback on it, that's a good time to bring that and discuss it with the group to get feedback on stuff. So it could be anything, and it doesn't have to be VMware related, just basically IT. The VMUG Community Challenge, as we talked about several of the other meetings, we did win. We were, I think, number 4 in that contest. So we get to have a hands-on lab, or what they call a social lab. And we need to pick a topic that we want to do it on. So we will, I think probably the best thing is for us to send out a survey asking for ideas, or if you want to put it on our Slack channel, that would work well too. So depending on what topic we want to do it on will help determine the timing or when it will actually happen, is what I'm told. So I guess they must change it up and do only certain ones at a time and move it around. So we'll have to figure out when we're going to do that. And then VMUG Advantage giveaways. I don't think I have the details in here, but we do have the contest going on for the VMUG Advantage giveaway. There's more information on our website, but we'll be doing the giveaway in December for that. We did one in June, and if you had entries before June, they do carry over to the December drawing as well. So that's, as we've talked about quite a bit, is the the $200 value with the eval experience and that type of thing. So if you're not familiar with it, you can check with one of the leaders or go on my website, and there's a lot of information on those. So, and again, the Summers giveaway is there. A few highlights from VMworld. There were a lot of announcements. I'm not going to go into big detail on a lot of them, but a few of them. vSphere 6.7 Update 1 has been released. And I should just look at my computer. It might make it easier for me. So there's a few things that are included in that. As far as the HTML5 client is supposed to be fully featured now, which, of course, they'll always be adding things to it. You can now update from 6.5 Update 2 to 6.7. So prior to that, you could not do that because Update 2 had been released after 6.7 was released. So you would have been basically downgrading some of your security if you moved on. So that has been corrected with this update. There's a blog that Adam Eckerly, which has spoke here for us a few times, did talking about the vSphere Platinum Edition. It's a new edition that was announced at VMworld above the Enterprise Plus. So it includes everything that the Enterprise Plus does and adds App Defense as part of that. So there's, if you go to that blog, he also talks about not only the Platinum Edition, but he also talks about the Update 1 and some of the other things that are in that. So vSAN 6.7 Update 1 was released. vRealize Suite 2018. I won't go through all those different things, but in NSX-T Data Center 2.3, and then the session videos, most of them can be found at videos.vmworld.com. So if you weren't able to go, or you were able to go and want to rewatch some of the sessions, they're available on there. So, I guess I did go into detail further down. I forgot. Anything I missed? The way, I guess, ways you receive entries for our VMUG Advantage, by being here, you get an entry for each meeting. If you go on our discussion page on our community site, and each entry, or you get an entry for each response or post that you do. So if you have questions for the community, or if you can help somebody else out in the community, you'll get an entry. All right. Okay, this is our basic agenda. Maybe I should have started with this. But we'll be doing my welcome that I'm doing now. We'll have the presentation from Rubrik with Shane. Then Kyle Reddy from VMware. He's their, I don't remember his title. He's the sales engineer for PowerCLI side of things.
Technical marketing engineer.
There you go. Technical marketing engineer, for those that didn't hear that. He'll be presenting. He's remote. He lives in Tampa. He's been traveling a lot for VMworld and UserCon, so we'll take what we can get. Remote's better than nothing. So, and Kyle's a really good guy, very, very, very smart. And if you're active in the community at all, he's always posting stuff. So, then we'll have the prize drawings and closing after Kyle. So.
Presented to VMworld too, so videos and VMworld.
Yeah, some good ones. Out of the sessions I went to, his session was the one I attended of his. He did multiples. Was the best one I attended, learned the most after that. And he'll be presenting, I think, a lot of that in this session tonight. So anyways, all right, that's all I have. So, does anybody have any questions or anything before we turn it over to Shane from Rubrik? All right, Shane, I'm going to hand it over to you. I did not give you the Zoom meeting, did I? That would help. Yeah, he's got a teleporter now.
So a couple quick things. First, my name is Shane Weinberg. I work for Rubrik. I'm an enterprise SE based out of Indianapolis, covering Indiana and Kentucky. I would like to mention I'm coming over the flu, so I was out most of last week until about Saturday. So if you hear me clearing my throat quite often, I apologize. Just warning in advance. A lot of my content will be on the Rubrik platform. I did this being a PowerCLI, PowerShell series. I do have some to show at the end. I am not great at PowerShell, and I just want to level set there. So maybe you guys can help me fix some of my scripts, perhaps. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah, first and foremost, who wants to see a bunch of slide decks or a bunch of slides in the deck? No. Okay, not a lot of architecture, so we can just jump right into the user interface and start pushing buttons. Yeah, let's go. Okay, cool. Does anybody know much about Rubrik? No, nothing. What we do, who we are, anything like that. Okay, so first off, we're a backup product. I like to call this buzzword bingo, but it's true. It's we're cloud native, so we're built for the cloud. Meaning that we have we're cloud native. We're API first architecture, so our APIs into Azure, AWS, GCP. We're built on a hyperconverged platform, meaning that our solution is a 2 micro hardware configuration with our CDM software, cloud data management software layered on top of that. That's our delivery device. So we do things quite intelligently. We remove a lot of the complexity from your backups. Who loves backups? The most popular part of the infrastructure stack is backups. Yeah, this is kind of intentional, actually. So yeah, in my former life, I come from prior to Rubrik and another hyper-convergent startup I worked at. I worked for Alibaba and IBM as global admin. So I worked with I did probably most of what you guys do, as do, if there's anything else here, on a day-to-day basis. My responsibilities at it also as a TSM admin. So I know the pains that's involved with the different pieces and parts of just backup in general, creating schedules, jobs, groups, and that's just software piece. Then there's the hardware piece, the catalog server and the storage subsystem, so on and so forth. I think we all know the parts and pieces that I'm talking about, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. So with that said, I'm just going to jump to the user interface. I can keep things interactive, so if at any point in time, if there's questions, feel free to ask, interrupt me. I have no problems doing so. I do have a history with the VMUG as well. I started the Indianapolis VMware user group way back when. I want to say how many years ago, because as you couldn't tell by the white, I have a few years on some of you. But yeah, great community. Thanks for having me present, and I'm just going to jump right in. Excuse me. So what we're looking at is our user interface. It's HTML5 compliant. So a lot of people are a fan of that. There's no Java, no Flash players. You don't have to update plugins and so on and so forth. Everything is API driven. As I mentioned, we're an API first architecture. Not only do we expose all our APIs to our end user community, meaning that if you're, quick show of hands, anybody using DRA? Good. So one person. How about ServiceNow? Stone? Anything like that? Splunk? Okay, so we have integration, sumo logic, anything that I wouldn't say anything because it's a large statement, but most things that you use that have some type of API endpoint, we can connect into. So not only do we open up our APIs to our community, but we also use them ourselves. We consume them. So if I were to go to put my browser into developer mode, if I were to, there we go. So, put my browser in developer mode, some API calls within the Rubrik. That's using our own APIs. I like to say if you can click it, you can script it. I like to spend a little bit of time on this piece because I think it's pretty powerful. We enable our customers out of the box. If you're not familiar with APIs or scripting or anything like that, we give you tools. If you look at this URL right here, if I go over to this tab, you're going to see the same URL with a different extension here, docs.v1. This is our API spec. It's all the documentation regarding our APIs. And you can go through and read out, study, figure out, so on and so forth. We also include within the brick, you can just change the extension, playground, basically. I can go in here and go to, say I'm completely foreign to APIs and JSON output, things of that nature. I can go and go up here and try it out. So I'm going to see what this code does. Guess it's going to, actually I'm going to go and authorize myself real quick, which I should have done, but I didn't. Authorize. So basically what this allows you to do is play around, like I said, teach, learn. So try it out and it's going to come back, there's a curl command, it's going to come back with the response saying, okay, this is version 4.2.0. But we have a whole ton of different things like that you can play around with. And we have, to double off that, we have our own GitHub repository that's completely open. We have a PowerShell scripts, we have a Python SDK, we have anybody using Chef, Puppet, Ansible, anything like that. Any DevOps tools like that. If you're not now, you probably will at some point in time. So we have cookbooks and playbooks and things like that you can download, make them your own. I think that's pretty powerful just from an enablement perspective. Not only are you getting a really great product for backup and data management, but as well as a way to learn to use different types of tools within the product and with your other products within your ecosystem. So looking at the user interface, we like to keep things pretty simple. When I click through different tabs here or different areas, the UI will stay pretty static. You don't have to learn a new interface every time you want to change something to do something else. Right now, I'm protecting our vSphere environment. If I click this button here, you're going to see all the different types of objects we can protect, whether it's AHV, Hyper-V, physical Windows, physical Linux, SQL servers, Oracle using what we call managed logins, native EC2 instances, so on and so forth. We can protect multiple different types of objects in multiple different ways. And the way we protect them is by using what we call SLA domains. And as I mentioned before, you probably, if you've worked with backups in the past, if you've managed backups, whether it's been domain, whether it's TSM, the insert X, you've had to create jobs and schedules and groups and all that stuff. You spare statement? Yeah? Okay, great. So we take a declarative approach, meaning that you tell us what, when, and where. What I mean by that, if I go to my SLA domains, we already have a bunch pre-canned, but I'll create one from scratch here. I'll just be very creative and call it FWVMUG. So from here, I'm just going to say, I'm going to take a snapshot of the 4 hours and keep it for a day. I'm going to do a daily. So I'm creating my retention policies daily. My frequencies, my retentions. Take a daily, keep it for a week. Take a monthly, keep it for a year, take a yearly. And then depending on your retention policy, if you're healthcare, it could be 7, 10, 20, or forever. 7 years, right? You do have the option to set up backup windows, but you don't need to. We have intelligent AI algorithms. So I've told you buzzword bingo. I've already said AI. Pretty soon I'll say machine learning. No worry. But we're smart enough. What we're doing API calls to your vCenter server all the time. So once you connect a vCenter server to us, we're going to catalog and index all your virtual machines. We're not doing anything to them at that point, except for cataloging them and indexing them. Once you apply an SLA policy to a VM, to a host, you can do it at the host level, you can do it at the folder level, or at the VM level. We're going to start learning the workloads of those particular virtual machines, and based off workload, we'll determine the right time that VM needs to be backed up. Now, I always say that, because what we'll do is a first full, then a forever incremental afterwards. So during that first full period of time, you may want to set a window. You may want to do Friday at midnight to Sunday at 5 a.m., something to that effect. Up to you, really. You don't have to. So right here, what I've done is created a pretty standard policy. I can take it a step further. Maybe I want to archive out to Azure or AWS or GCP, and we can do Azure Cold, we can do SDIA, S3, standard S3, whatever, Glacier, whatever you'd like to do, we can do that. I can configure remote settings, check my archival target, choose my bucket. I'll just choose S3. And I'm going to say I want to retain 32 days. That's a touchy slider bar. 30 days. I want 30 days of data retained on my brick, on premises in my data center. After that, the 31st day, we're going to start archiving out to your blob store, your S3 bucket, insert X. I can take it a step further as well. So you add another data center in a secondary location, whatever it may be. I can set up an application target and then say I want to keep 10 days on that application target. So what I've done within a few mouse clicks is created a very robust schedule that I can apply to host level, as I said, folder level, or VM level. That's going to do my dailies, weeklies, monthlies, as well as archival and replication. To me, that's pretty cool. And saying backup and pretty cool in the same type of paragraph is kind of a different thing, in my opinion. So I'm going to cancel all of that. Any questions on any of this? Pretty straightforward so far? Cool.
So just so I'm on the same page. So it's not going to put it up to your file until you hit that 30-day mark, or is it going to store it and start streaming it up there?
It's a good point. Yes and yes. Okay. So if you notice, I'll go back to it real quick. Just
you repeat the question.
So what he was asking is that, correct me if I'm wrong. So we're going to store 30 days of data on the appliance on premises, and then on the 31st day, we're going to start archiving out to the cloud. But to your point, I'm just going to do a quick. I think his question was, can you archive at the same time, right? Okay, and I just, like I said, just go here real quick. Select the bucket, and we have this option called Enable Inst Archive. So what happens at that point in time, writes to the brick, gets written, moves out to the cloud. So you have that option for really highly available workload type stuff that you want to protect right away in multiple locations. That'd be a good use case.
Or just a limited WAN interface back out and make take some time on some of that stuff.
Sure, absolutely. Yep. Cool. So when I created my SLA, and like I said, you can create multiple SLAs. Most people do. They'll have like a gold, silver, bronze, or critical, minor, that type of thing, depending on their naming convention. One thing that a lot of our customers will do, and I think it's a pretty good idea, is create a bronze type policy where they take a backup once a day and keep it for 30 days, and apply that at the host level, right? So what happens? So you create VMs. Once that VM is created, it's automatically covered by that 1 day, 30-day policy. Take a snapshot every day, keep it for 30 days. Why I think that's important is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, like I said, I've sat in admin seat many, many years, and my experience is that I've spun up, a new SQL environment or something. I've done a lot of work, so I've spun up some VMs. Somebody comes by and says, "Hey, can I borrow you for a second?" But then, 3 hours later, you get back to your desk. I used to call them drive-bys. But you get back to your desk and you start doing something else. You haven't protected those VMs. But with that umbrella on your host level, you're at least going to have one backup a day. You keep it for 30 days. But within that, you're going to have that aha moment. It's like, oh, crap, I need to protect those VMs. But you're already covered, so you can apply another one at the folder level or at the particular VM level. And the way that's done is pretty straightforward. I'll just pull up my VM here real quick. And another thing I did mention earlier, everything is searchable through the UI. So if I wanted to search for any items with my naming convention, I can do that, and it's going to pull up anything that has, my databases, that type of stuff. I can also do that search capability at the VM level, and it's going to show me my VMs that I have to test with my Linux 1, Windows 1. So I go to my Windows VM. As I mentioned earlier, the user interface, not a lot has changed, just different views within the same views, but different items within those views. This is more of an object level, meaning that I'm looking at it at the VM level or the SQL database level. To the left here, you're going to see the SLA policy, if I have any live mounts, which I'll touch on momentarily. Then to the right, you're going to see the what I call aqua dots. And these are points in time where we've had a successful backup. I can do a search globally for a certain file. Maybe just one file is deleted. Just do a quick search. Everything's cataloged and indexed. I can see 47 versions of this file. If I scroll all the way down, my policy is in place that after the 30 days, it starts going onto the cloud. This icon represents that this particular version is in the cloud, and I can download and restore it from Azure, AWS, GCP. I do the same exact thing with any other file, download, restore. Restore will restore over. It's going to give you the option to, I don't know why I did that. So it'll give you the option to restore over the existing file or to another folder. Download you'll get presented with a download link where you can go and grab the file from the link. If I want to recover a VM, well, maybe I don't want to recover a VM. Maybe I want to stand up a VM in parallel for testing, perhaps. Maybe I want to do, install version 2.0 of this new software, but I don't want to do it on my production machine because, testing on production is never a fun thing to do. Or a smart thing to do, rather. So I'm going to mount my VM to a ESX host, simply by going to mount. And choose whatever host I'd like to put it on. I can put it on the current cluster or the current host it's on, or select a different one. I'll put it on the current one, no big deal. By default, we are going to power the VM on, but we're going to power it on without networking because we know that if you power a VM on with the same name, security identifier, IP address, and an Active Directory environment, AD doesn't like that, right? Pretty safe statement, right? So no networking. I'm going to mount that. jump over to vSphere here, and in a couple seconds, I'll have that VM with the timestamp. It's not powered on yet, it's going through the process now. But what I like to point out is that when you look at the storage, we've just presented an NFS share to ESX. So this VM is running off us. Each node in the cluster has SSD and three spinning disks. So the SSD allows you to actually run workloads, and we, the number is roughly 30,000 IOPS per brick. I think it's a pretty fair number. So we can run a substantial amount of workloads off of Rubrik, although we are not secondary storage. We're not intended to be used. We're not a hypervisor. We don't have one embedded in. So we're not intended to be used like that. We are a means to back up your data. So the goal here would be stand up the VM, do your testing. If you want to promote that VM, move over to your production environment, do a storage motion off of us, free up that space for backups. Any questions? No? Great. When I'm done, I can go to my live mounts within the user interface. And you'll see that particular VM. And it has been very, really nice demo with citizens today. You're supposed to clean up after yourself. Here we go. Show you. I mount it. It's going to remove it from the vSphere inventory. No harm, no foul. The storage was reclaimed. There's nothing hanging around in VMware that you have to go clean up. Now, when you might have saw the instant recovery option, I'm not actually going to do that, but I do want to talk about it just a tad bit. So I'll go back to my Windows VM here. So within that, I did the mount. Instant recovery is what I call the big red button. If I would hit instant recovery, and instant recovery is designed if you hit a ransomware boot loop. Workload is down, VM is down, you can't do anything with it, you need to get the workload up and running very, very quick. Instant recovery is your friend. What it will do is, with your instant recovery, we're going to send a signal to the compromised virtual machine, right? We're going to rename it to deprecated, power it off, then spin up a new one from the version that we chose that was not infected. So rapid recovery from, like I said, boot loop or BSOD or insert nasty thing X on a server. So you can recover super quick. The principal instant recovery amount are very, very similar. Again, instant recovery is, like I said, the big red button that's going to spin up a new VM, power off the old one, rename it deprecated, and then you can go and do remediation as needed. You can also export, recover files, launch on cloud. That's another cool thing you can do. You can, what we'll do is instantiate the virtual machine into AWS or Azure as an AMI or a VMDK. We have a way to, what we call a built instance that facilitates that transition from, or migration rather, I guess migration would be the right word, from a VMDK to a VHDX or an AMI. So that VM is actually running within the cloud. Any questions so far? I think I'll be slated for an hour. It's going to be tough for me to fill an hour. I'll tell you that.
So whether you do a live mount or instant recovery, you're still using the Rubrik as storage resources. You're using your VMware host as your RAM.
That's correct. That's right. Yep. Yes, sir. So any SQL admins in the room? Okay, so one SQL admin. So I can speak SQL like on a conversational level, not fluently. So
Yeah, I was the closest guy to the SQL server when the last guy left, so that's why I'm the admin.
okay, very cool. So the reason I bring that up is that we have that same type of recovery. That same type of recovery exists for Linux and all the different things I pointed out earlier. But recovering SQL can be very difficult. It can take a very long time. I was talking with the customer the other day about it took them 10 hours to recover a 430 gig SQL server. Seems like a little long time. I'm not going to say what products they're using in the line because I don't kick dirt in our competitors' faces, but we can do it much quicker. And the way we do that is by going to server maps, SQL Server DBs. And again, I can filter or I can search just kind of like that Google search functionality. There's tons of databases. There's about 200 WSUs that use this lab pod, the America's lab pod. So I do a quick survey, and that's what I want to do. But for my databases, all I need to do is be able to learn how to use my keyboard. So here's my databases, my free database. I have a couple more, I believe, but my Spartan ones. Choose my Spartan Sprint database. And you're going to see a very similar screen that we saw with the Windows VM. They're going to have overview as well as recovery points via the aqua dots here. So I'm going to go to the 18th. Each dot here is an actual point in time when that VM was backed up. This is what we're doing here is rolling up the T logs along with it. So if I wanted to, I can go to a very specific point in time and mount it from there. It's going to ask me some questions about what host I want to mount it to. It's going to ask me what instance I want to mount it to. It's a standard. And my creativity here, the Fort Wayne VMUG, restore. And hit mount. So now I can drop down into my VM here to refresh on my databases. And Fort Wayne VMUG Live. Well, I don't think should be that. I don't think that should happen that quick. What's that?
I think it's present. Projector display.
Oh. Well, that's good because okay. Something's not working on my end, so I'll fix that real quick. I was messing around with my scripts earlier, and that must be a relic for that. So
Okay, came back.
pay no attention about the man behind the glass and unmount that one there. So I'm going to go through that process again because since you probably didn't see it. Mount. We good? Okay, great. All right, so point 4 by Spartan. When do we stop seeing the screen?
Whenever you want to,
Okay, so click on my Spartan Sprint. Choose the point in time. Say whatever time doesn't really matter. Hit amount. Man, my typing skills are just awesome today. All right, so
Are you only sharing?
I did this in an online demo the other day, so let me fix that real quick. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna reshare. I don't know why it does that. All right, so we can see now. I'd like to get this at an earlier point in time, but the FTV, Fort Wayne VMUG restore, it's already done. If I wanted to, I can go and run a query. I like to show people this as well. I'm gonna have to admit I copied and well, I didn't. I have a location query that I just copy and paste because I'm lazy. I think that's okay. I'm not a SQL DBA, so.
It's efficient.
There we go. So execute that. The reason I want to do this is I like to show that FWVMUG is on us. Now from the live mount of a virtual machine, we presented an NFS share to ESX. Now to the SQL host, we presented an SMB3 share. So that database is still running on us. What you can do is, you have your Fort Wayne VMUG restore, you have your Fort Wayne VMUG production. You can do compares, you can, do regression testing, you can replace columns, rows, tables, whatever you need to do in line with production. And when you're done, you simply unmount it. Pretty straightforward.
A restore situation like what you just did here, let's say you just want to take that restore and make it production. How do you finish that? Is that an SQL thing or what's that?
That would be an SQL thing. Yep.
I didn't know. What about on the VM level? I didn't see it on the VM level.
On the VM level, so what you do is once that VM's mounted and you did whatever you wanted to do and you wanted to promote it, maybe it's not inline testing, it's for something else, you storage vMotion off of us.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, dang it, man. What am I doing wrong here? I'm sorry. Maybe I show my desktop and then it'll share everything on there. That just makes too much sense. All right, so covered live mounted Windows VM, SQL databases. Those are, I mean, we can do, like I said, we can do Oracle, we can do all the different things like that. Any questions, anything else you got? There's plenty of things I'm going to show you still. I just want to know if there's anything along those lines that you're interested in seeing or hearing. Cool. So what I'm going to cover now is what I think is pretty cool. We did a really good job, in my opinion. Of course, I'm going to say this, but creating multi-tenancy with role-based apples isn't an easy thing to do. We've done it, and we've done it really well. So, I'm logged into Shane Weinbrett here. If I sign out, what I can do is, I'll back up a little bit, I'm sorry. So what I can do is say you have in your environment, you have a help desk, and we want the help desk to be able to restore files only, period. They get a help desk ticket, I lost file, they can restore a file. You don't want them to be able to touch SLAs, you don't want them to touch SQL databases, anything else like that, Linux hosts, insert X. You can lock all that down, and all they can do is restore files. Another thing that we find very useful is, from my experience, and it's nothing bad, SQL DBAs like to control their environments, meaning they like to have access to their servers. So we allow you to create those groups. You can create a SQL group where you can assign just the SQL DBAs, their SQL servers, so they can do live mounts and things like that. And you can lock down other aspects of it as well. And again, we do that through multi-tenancy and role-based apples. So if I were to log out of here and log in as, it's my standard it's going to allow me to choose which organization. So I created a SQL DBAs, so just to kind of give you a visualization what I can and can't do. So if I go here, I can now only see, if I go to virtual machines, vSphere VMs. Before there was a ton here. I didn't filter anything out. There's a ton of VMs. I only have access to this one host. If I go to servers and apps, SQL Server DBs, I only have access to my databases, which you'll see my Spartan databases, as well as master model, and a couple others I have running on there. So that's pretty, that's pretty handy, just from a sake of management. And we have audit logs, we have reporting, all that type of stuff. So if somebody comes in and deletes something too. So sign over there. So reporting is pretty, a lot of people ask about reporting. We have built-in reports, a report gallery. You can see an SLA compliance report, protection task, whatever you really want to. The ones we have canned are pretty robust, but you can go and create your own. So if you want to do it, go into the gallery and say, create a report based off protection task details. Got to name it. If you here, choose your different attributes to measurements. So you want to see task status, and you want to see failed tasks, for example. Object name, failed tasks, that type of stuff. You can filter out what you want to see, what you don't want to see, and over the past 30 days. This is great for your C-levels that come down to you and say, hey, I want to know what's you spent X amount of money on this new backup solution. I want to know if it's working. So bam, day-to-day report, very easy to do, finish. And then you can, once you finish it, you can, let's pretend we just created this one. You can schedule how that's received, via email and the frequency. To kind of dovetail off that piece, we have a separate platform, if you will. It is a separate platform. It's a SaaS-based platform called Polaris. It runs in GCP backed with Kubernetes, and it is what I like to call a global manager of managers. So you might start off with one brick. That's what we call our appliance, a brick. But say you get a virtual appliance. We have virtual appliances for vSphere, Hyper-V. We have cloud clusters, so you could spin up a version of Rubrik within Azure, AWS, or GCP. So you can have Polaris that is managing all of these. So you have insight to all your clusters, what's online, what's offline. This is the cluster I was just on there too, and I can see details about that particular cluster. I could also go to reports, because what we've done here is we've taken all that data that you backed up on that particular cluster, and all your clusters actually, and created a unified system of record in our Polaris SaaS platform. It's just metadata. I do like to point that out. We're not sending data up to the cloud. It's just the metadata. But we've aggregated, we've indexed and cataloged all that data. So now you can start reporting on it. So once you have multiple, bricks in your environment, whether they're physical or virtual, and you get that call from your CISO or CIO or whatever it may be that says, hey, I want to know what's going on here. You can create a report on multiple different things, infrastructure, object compliance, so on and so forth. So it's just that one screen that kind of gives you that overall look of everything. And this is kind of the dashboard view of it all. You can see where your clusters are geographically, out of compliance, in compliance, so on and so forth. That's one piece of the GPS or Polaris. This is called Polaris GPS. We also released recently Radar, which we're releasing modules into this platform. So if I go to this particular interface, you're going to see it's a very similar interface, a lot less objects being protected. This is our Radar platform. What Radar does, and this is pretty nuts and stuff, we're already collecting your data, right? We're backing up your data. So with Radar, what we're doing is figuring out a baseline using machine learning. KNN is a very popular machine learning protocol. KNN is what we use. And we are starting to create a baseline of the VM. So we know that over day one, you have a 7 to 10% change rate. And that might fluctuate 8 to 12, 5 to 7, or something like that. But all of a sudden, day 30, you have a 47% change rate. That's an indication of something anomalous, right? That's a good chance that you've gotten hit by malware, ransomware, something to that effect. Lots of change files, lots of deleted files. We can report on that very, very quickly, very easily, and you can actually dive in and start looking at it. So if I go to events here, for the past 30 days, choose event type, anomalies. You're going to see all the anomalous behavior that we've detected. And so let's get on to the 21st. I can investigate that snapshot. And I can start diving in and seeing, what files are infected. I can restore that type of stuff. So it gives you lots of, we're going to email you, we're going to alert you on that behavior. Say, hey, you need to look at this VM because something's not happening and something's changed dramatically on it. So we're giving you that power to proactively correct issues before they go too far south, which I think, again, is something that's pretty cool in the product. We're building out that SaaS-based platform with different types of modules. Some I can't really talk about, but it's a pretty robust platform. So, any questions on the overall dashboard functionality? I know it's I think I hit the high points. Generally speaking, when I do a presentation like this, I like to, kind of give the overview of the high-level features, and if you're interested, we can then set up a more deep dive type conversation with your SQL DBAs or your Windows admins or everyone in between. But this being the PowerShell series, right? PowerShell, PowerCLI. I do want to finish with some.
question before you go there.
Yeah.
You
mentioned Splunk earlier. Do you guys have a Splunk app?
Not yet, but it's coming. It is being worked on. But that's best I have for you right now. It's on the roadmap. It's coming quickly on the roadmap. The individual working on it out of the UK, he's actually out to the 24th. But yeah. So we'll see how I can make myself work with trying to be a PowerShell guy. So just like anything, maybe a little bit of information about what you guys have done with, has been PowerCLI focused? All PowerCLI. Okay.
Yeah.
So first you need to import the module, right? I mean, it's pretty standard stuff. I've imported the module. You have to connect, with PowerCLI, you're connected to a vCenter server or ESX server or whatever it may be. With us, you're connected to one of the actual nodes within the cluster itself. So if I execute this script here, like I said, I wrote this yesterday after a week or so of having the flu. So things aren't working perfect, but long story made short, you can see that we have the modules available. It's not terribly hard to write a script. If I execute here, it should prompt me for my username and password to connect to the what I've noticed is, and I don't know if it's just bad coding or what, but it prompts me for my username and password more than I feel like it should. So I figured out that I should copy that after I left. So, and these scripts are, for some reason, it's taking longer than I think it should run to run this script. So here in a moment, it'll ask me to yes to all type thing. So give me a moment. While we're waiting here, what I've done is, it's pretty straightforward stuff. It's basically all around live mounting a database. So as you can see, I've created some variables arbitrary, DB1, those variables equaling my cluster and one of my databases, connect to the server, get Rubrik database so I can find the database name. A lot of, again, just from the experience I've had with talking with SQL DBAs, they like to, one, own their own environments, and two, use a lot of PowerShell. So having this ability to create their own scripts has been very helpful. So I think this is actually running the entire script. So if I were to go back to the SQL Server Manager, I bet it's going to start mounting a database here. Like I said, maybe not. Okay. I'll go back to PowerShell. So I should be able to go, and I say should, begrudgingly, I should be able to go and live mount a database by selecting that line here and running that selection, and it didn't like that. So, like I said, I'm not a PowerShell pro. I just play one on TV. Let's try that again. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's not. I'm not really on the line there.
You just click on line 24 and then run. Or, sorry, just anywhere in that line. Just go up and click the button you're clicking.
There we go.
You don't have to hold it. It'll do it for you. Yeah, same already exists.
Oh, that exists. That's probably why. Let's see here. We do a refresh. Yeah, so within it says fully do my live mount. So I'll prove that I actually did do something. That is the name I gave it. So when I executed this entire script, I should be able to run it line by line. For some reason, that's not working for me correctly. And again, could be my nasty code, whatever it may be. But long story made sure I was able to run that simple script, and it's going to live mount that database as I did within the UI. So you don't have to use the UI for everything. I can go back and see my live mounts and see. The demo guys are not smiling on me today.
Well, the end of your script removed it. So, yeah.
Oh, so, okay. There it is. So it's a pretty robust script if it worked correctly. So I should refresh here and it should be gone. And it is. So that's kind of the some of my PowerShell. I mean, we could probably dive in. I could open up a shell and kind of show you the module and part pieces of parts of that if you'd like. If there's value in that.
Anybody like me to do that?
I just thought it was interesting that you didn't have that many lines of code. You were still able to do a lot.
Yeah. I just wish it worked correctly.
I think it did. I think it just went. I think you did everything.
Well, there's something weird. I mean, because I've been messing with this, and it's like I said, I should be able to run a line. I should be able to run a connect just from that line, and it would execute that. But it doesn't. It only executes by the.
You have to do the lines above it first, and then you should be able to do that.
Well, I've tried that angle too. So one, I'm not a PowerShell master, so that could be part of it. But I don't know. I thought it was pretty clean code. But yes.
Yeah, it looks good. Not knowing everything that you're running, but it looks nice.
Well, thanks. Just didn't seem to work the way I liked it to.
Yeah, and it probably wouldn't take much to do.
No, and I was working on the hotel earlier too, but so yeah, I mean, like I was saying, you probably go to this is just the shell here. I've already imported the module, as you can probably tell, but this is the full list of all the command lists we have, and then I could go in and search by database or by KVM or whatever it may be, Hyper-V, and just choose those scripts. So there's lots of functionality that we enable, as I mentioned earlier. I think we're pretty big on enablement. We want our customers to be able to have the tools that they need to do their jobs right out of the bag without having to, try to mix and match multiple things to make them work. So that was 43 minutes. That was further than I thought I'd get within an hour. Any questions? Anything you guys like to do? Yeah, what's up?
If you've got a backup schedule for a specific VM, does that override, say, the umbrella policy?
Yes. So everything overrides the umbrella policy.
Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry. So he asked if you had a backup schedule for a specific VM, does that override, how I mentioned that umbrella SLA for the top level? And you don't have to do that, by the way. I just think it's a good idea. But yes, that is anything that goes more granular overrides the existing. So that 1 day, take a snap every day, keep it for 30 days. If you created a whatever policy and applied it to a VM, that 1 day every 30 days doesn't apply anymore. It's the more granular one that you applied. Any other questions? Yep.
Being built on hyperconverged would mean that it has a 10 gig backbone and everything.
Yep. 10 gig SFP or 10 gig base seed. Yep. And if you need to add more, because so a lot of our customers, when you have a backup solution, it's not easy to get away from it. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, you have to age out. You spend a lot of money, lots of hours. You may not like it, but it's something that you've worked with a long time. So a lot of our customers, we do what we call as a land and expand, is where you might get a 20 terabyte brick from us and start moving some workloads over to us, and then start phasing out some of the other infrastructure, that type of thing, backup infrastructure. My point being there is that you can add nodes as you grow. So you start with 20, 30, 40, whatever it may be. You need another 20, 6 months, add another brick, plug it in, does a discovery, and you're good to go. It's kind of like in mechanics or scale computing, you need more resources, add another node.
Like start out 20 nodes. Like, wait a second.
No, 20 terabytes. Did I say? I might have said nodes. Yeah, to start out with 20 terabytes. I'd love you to start out with 20 nodes. That'd be awesome. Yeah, it's 5 bricks. Okay.
My guys.
There you go. All right, well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time and listen to what I had to say. That's all. And did you mention the Bitly link for the service giveaway?
Yeah,
so,
I'm going to mention it again.
Okay, cool. Okay. Already getting the feedback.
Did everybody get the link earlier to sign up for the Sonos that wanted it? Okay. If I can get this thing to clip on my pocket. There we go. All right. So it's a little earlier than we had told Kyle. We told him 7 o'clock. So he told me that once I give him a heads up, he needs about 5 minutes. So why don't we go ahead and take a few minute break and use restroom, whatever, talk amongst yourselves, and we'll get started back up as soon as he's ready to start. We're going to have a microphone that we'll have to use to talk to Kyle and if you have a question or a comment. So get one of our attentions. I'll sit here at the middle table if you have any questions, and I'll have the mic so that he can hear you on the other end. And all right, Kyle Ruddy, like I mentioned, is from VMware, and I don't see him yet. So Kyle, do you have your video on?
Can you hear me?
Oh, there we see you, a picture. Hang on, we're turning you up. All right, go ahead and try again.
Hey, there we go.
Hey, there we go. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
All right, sweet, fantastic. So, thank you. This is definitely my first experience at running one of these through a Zoom meeting. Definitely appreciate your all flexibility and in allowing me to do this remotely, as I had a team event that happened to be done out in Palo Alto this week. So I'm kind of doing double duty this week. So without further ado, let me share my screen here, and let's dive into the content. There's share. Five. There we go. All right, so David's told me that you guys have been talking about PowerCLI for the past couple meetings, and that's fantastic. Hopefully you guys have learned a lot, and if nothing else, you have a bunch of questions and things of that nature. So as he mentioned, there should be a microphone to pass around. If you have any questions, I've got a bunch of slides, some stuff to talk about, and feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to basically the goal here is to make this the best use of your all time, because you all are taking time out of your evening to listen to me, to listen to Shane and Rubrik and company. So let's make this the best use of your time as we can. So with that, there we go. So here's a little bit about me. My name is Kyle Ruddy, as David said. I'm a senior technical marketing architect for VMware that's within the VMware product group that focuses on both vSphere and VMware Cloud on AWS. However, outside of that, I'm really involved in the community, big community advocate. So I pretty much share anything that I do, either on my personal blog or out there on GitHub. Both of those is KM Ruddy. I also help out with a podcast that's called The Brown Bag. So therefore, if I'm not presenting, I'm generally there trying to help host or field Twitter questions, things of that nature. That's a pretty cool free resource that's held once a week. And even though it has the little V on the name there, they're not covering just VMware topics. So currently they've got a session going on Azure. I know they're going to be there at AWS reInvent coming up later this year, and they've got quite a few other things going on than just VMware topics. So definitely feel free to check that out. Social media is or Twitter is my social media stream of choice. It's definitely easier to reach me on Twitter than it is pretty much anywhere else. And I'm KM Ruddy there. And then here recently, I was awarded the designation of Microsoft MVP in the cloud and data center management area. So pretty cool from that aspect. All right, so let's cover some of the basics here before we start rolling, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So, from the VMware side, we really, kind of push everybody to be on the latest and greatest version. PowerCLI is a utility that's supported by VMware support. You can log into your VMware portal and create a support request based on PowerCLI. And generally, one of the first things that support's going to do is tell you, are you on the latest version? So we highly recommend that you're on the latest version. There's fantastic backwards compatibility. Basically, if it's supported by VMware, then PowerCLI is also going to support interacting with it. So installing PowerCLI, this is something that's gone through some changes over the past year or so, where we've removed the MSI version and we've created our installation is now available through the PowerShell gallery itself. So now you just open up your PowerShell window, type in install module -name VMware.PowerCLI, and you're off and running with PowerCLI. So it's, we've really streamlined that process. And speaking of streamlining processes, updating is amazingly simple. It's literally just update module, very similar experience. However, the important thing to note with this is that in terms of the incremental updates, so like if we're moving from PowerCLI 10.0 to PowerCLI 10.1, you're only downloading the new bits. So basically the new modules. So you're not having to re-download the entire product set. You're only downloading those modules that have changed. And I'll skip that part because I'm sure you guys have already talked about ISEs. So a little bit about getting started. First things first, verify that your resources are safe to use. Verify that they're doing exactly what you think they should. So when you're going through your ISE or your integrated scripting environment, you should be looking for things that are known as unsafe verbs. Now, when something's unsafe, it means that it's going to be making a modification to your environment. So basically, anything except for a get is probably going to be known as an unsafe verb. So some examples here is add, new, set, and etc. And then when you are making use of those unsafe verbs, make sure that you have a good idea of what it's actually going to be doing. And PowerShell includes a couple parameters that can help make that really simple. The first one is using what if. So it literally, say you need to change or modify a VM, by using set-VM. If you include what if, it'll print out a little note about what's going to happen. So it's going to say, oh, we are going to change this VM and give it, this many number of CPU. And there's a little bit of a change for confirm. This is another parameter that you can add, and it's going to prompt you with that same text. And then you can tell it either, Y for yes and accepting that change, or no, go back. So kind of a safety mechanism right before it actually runs and makes that modification. And next up, use a test environment. The VMware Hands-On Labs is a great use case for testing out your scripts and other resources of that nature. Because even though you can't copy files into the Hands-On Lab, you can copy paste. In essence, using your clipboard to move the body of your text, of your script text into the Hands-On Labs, and then you can interact with that environment. And if something breaks out there, worst case scenario, turn it off and redeploy a brand new one, and then you're back up and running. So a whole lot better than having to do a bunch of cleanup in your own environment. All right, so let's get into some PowerCLI specific things, and then we'll get into some more PowerShell based things. So you all have probably covered that PowerShell interacts with objects, and PowerCLI is a module or a set of modules that works with PowerShell, that extends it. So everything that you're doing within PowerShell and PowerCLI is object-based. Now the key point here is that not all objects are equal. So there are two main types of objects that you're going to be interacting with when it comes to PowerCLI. you have your .NET objects and your vSphere objects. A little bit of a rundown comparison about those. So your .NET module or your .NET objects, these are going to be the top level objects, like when you're using get VM, that's getting back a virtual machine object. So really that comes down to a subset of the properties that are available that you can interact with and obtain information about. You can use some of the additional PowerShell functionalities as far as get help and get command to list additional information about those capabilities and so forth. And while I don't exactly agree with the bottom line here that it's generally geared toward the starter and intermediate, but I do believe that is primarily who makes use of those. Then we also have the vSphere objects. And what I mean by vSphere objects is that these are the entire object set that's returned by the API. So this doesn't matter if you're using PowerShell and PowerCLI, or if you're using .NET, or if you're using Python, in which case it's PyVMami, and etc. You're going to get back that same API-based object, which is going to include all the properties that are available for it. You're going to have the full complement of the vSphere methods. And really, to get more information about it, you're going to have to get really familiar with the API reference, which if you're one of those people that have had to get used to that using the API references, I'll just apologize now, because it's a little rough. We're absolutely working on it, but it's not something that's really of a high quality. Rather, I shouldn't say that it's not high quality, but there are some things that are missing. There are some inconsistencies, and those are the things that we're looking to remedy. One of the ways that you can start interacting or realizing that you're working with a vSphere object is generally if you're making use of either getView or the .NET objects extension data properties. That's going to be your API reference, or that's how you're interacting with that. So that one definitely comes down to being of a skill set that's more of the intermediate and advanced side. I definitely wouldn't recommend that if you're on the beginner side to start taking a look at getView and using the extension data that can get pretty complex pretty quick. All right, so let's start talking about properties. So in the use cases that we're going to be discussing here, there's what's known as get inventory. So running this against an environment, we can see a bunch of information that's being pulled down. So we can see the name, we can see type, and the ID. So we get, like the top one is data centers, that's a folder. Next couple ones down are DC1, and that's a data center. Then towards the bottom, we get into VM host and virtual machine objects. There we go. So now what happens if we're looking to pull out all of our ESXi nodes using get inventory? Because this is pulling back a complete list of all of the objects in our environment, but we only want to select out or filter against our VM host types. So here's a simple one-liner. We're using get inventory. We're pipelining all of the information that was returned from get inventory into a where object. So we're going to search against that, specifically focused on the type property where it equals VM host. However, if you do this in your own environment, you're going to see that it doesn't actually work. There's not going to be any kind of response. If we go back 2 slides, we could see it. We saw that there were at least 2 different VM hosts that were listed. So we have to kind of dig a little bit deeper into it to get some more information about what's happening. So now we're going to make use of a PowerShell commandlet that's by the name of getMember. In this case, we're going to be focusing on the property type from that. Let's see, there we go. So we're digging down, we can see the type, and then we can see that it is defined as an object. It's the inventory.folder type object. So in that case, since we're now dealing with an object and not just a straight string or integer, or anything about long wait times, that means that there could be more information that's involved here. So here's a case where we run into what's known as extended type data, which is just in essence, additional properties and methods. And these are detailed in the PS1 XML file. And yes, PowerCLI does use these, and they are included with the PowerCLI installation method. So you can actually break it out and take a look at these and read through them. Oh, I'm missing a screenshot here. So basically what's in that file is a bunch of different XML code. And in this case, if we go through and look for the type that is specific to VM host, it ends up being a script block, which maybe I have a slide out of order because I think we might be still getting to that. So here we're looking through we're using get module, pulling out the VMware modules. Just in case we haven't already loaded them, we're using the list available parameter. Then for each one of those, we're going to filter out and just list the PS1 XMLs. So down there at the bottom, we can see the output from that. So because PowerCLI is multi-platform, meaning that it can run on Linux, Mac OS, or Windows, we can see that we have two different XML files that are being returned. One is a .NET, and then one is a .NET Core that's there in that bottom image. Okay, so here's the image that I was looking for. So in this case, we drill down into that. We're looking at our type, and we can see down towards the bottom in the bottom highlighted area that it's actually returning back a script block. So instead of just giving back us, just standard types, just strings, it's making modifications to that when it's being processed. There we go. So if we run our get inventory again, and we continue through using where object, and then use the get type method that's available for our inventory objects, and we replace out the IMPL portion of that, we can now start pulling back our hosts. So now we can return back 3 different hosts. So that was pretty much a way to kind of work around when things don't work exactly the way that we think. All right, so let's talk a little bit about tasks, because this is something that seems to be coming up more and more, especially on the community side. And so I set up a meeting, and I was talking to some of our engineers, and basically it came down to, how do we know whether it's a server-side task or a client-side task? And they literally responded back to me with this. So apparently it's just a simple yes or no. And is there a single server-side API call? Is really what that top box should read. And if it really comes down to a single method or a single interaction with the vCenter server, then it's going to be a server-side task. If there's multiple methods being used or multiple interactions with the vCenter server, it's going to not be a server-side task, and it'll be what's known as a client-side task. Now that's important here because we should differentiate there because the processing and the output management that's being done on the server side, it kind of changes the way things are handled. So a little bit of so if you've ever used a commandlet and it doesn't have the parameter for run async or run it as a task in the background, generally you're interacting with what's known as a server-side task. And that also means that when you create that task, you're going to have to update the progress of that task manually. So on the client side, I've already discussed a little bit about it having multiple API calls. However, that also means that the processing is done on our side, on the client side. And generally it could involve some API calls where no server connectivity is going to be required. So and that basically means if we're interacting with the output from a prior call, we can make subsequent calls without actually having to reach out to the vCenter server. And the progress is updated automatically. So if we have to go through and do like a get task, use that commandlet, then we don't have to continue polling the vCenter server to keep receiving updates. And most notably, you'll notice the availability of the run async parameter. All right, so let's talk a little bit about scripts and script optimization here. So basically, we're taking the Olympics type look at this. So it really comes down to that there's no single advice that can be applied across all scripts or all PowerShell-based resources. Every script is going to be different. There's going to be different parameters. There's going to be different properties. There's going to be different levels of interaction with those underlying objects. And really what it comes down to is that when it works, generally 80% of the work is done. You can call it good. You can, release that into your version control, either public or internal at your company. And, it works. So it's good, right? But we can always get faster. We can always optimize. We can always make things better. We can streamline, so especially think of those groups where you're either, you're starting to work at scale. So when I was, pretty much coming through the ranks, I was a longtime customer, and with each job change that I had, each environment that I was interacting with was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I never really interacted with an environment that got smaller. I don't know if I wasn't that lucky, or maybe I was lucky to not have to deal with that. But all of my environments were getting bigger, so that really emphasizes the timing or focusing on your performance there. And then there's also showing off and your geek cred of being able to post something like, hey, look, I've optimized this by 20, 30, 40%. Kind of fun. So let's talk about some guidelines here and some tips and tricks. All right, so first and foremost, limit the number of calls that you're doing. So in this case, we are pulling back information about all the VMs in our environment. And for each VM, we're looking at the statistics of CPU.usage.average and pulling back the latest sample. Now with that, we're also going to be selecting the specific properties of timestamp, the VM name, which if you notice here, we're dealing with a calculated property. So we're not dealing with the top level property, but we have to hit entity and then .name to pull back the VM name. And then we're taking a look at the value. And we're turning that into a calculated property as well, because maybe if we run this against several different statistics, the value could be RAM, could be CPU, could be disk, could be a couple other things. So in this case, we're changing the name value to be CPU %sign. But really the key point here is that we're doing a get VM, so then we're pulling back each VM, and then for each one of those VMs that's returned, we're doing a brand new get stat. So if we're in an environment that has 20 VMs, that means that we're interacting with the vCenter 20 different times. So to correct that, we can kind of shift our thinking a little bit. So in this case, we're doing a get stat at the top level and calling out our entity of get VM. So that means we're going to do one get stat call against all of our VMs. And then from that point, we're going to group it by our property name, or, because we're using that, we're dropping down into our script block there, calling out entity name. And so we know that that's our name value. And then we're pulling out just the information that we need. So instead of having to run, say, 20 calls, we're now making one call. It's a larger call, but it's still just one call. So it's gonna run faster. So, you know, you might think that we're done, right? Well, we can still optimize that. We can still take a look at some other things, because if we actually ran that output, we would notice that we're getting output for every single VM in our environment. So if we have systems that are powered off, then we're still going to get back information. So especially if we're going to put that into a graph, or we're going to do some calculations, like establish what the median values are. You know, we could skew those values, skew that output. So we can take this a step further and just validate. You know, make sure that all of these systems are powered on. So we're going to do another get VM, pipe that into where object, and saying, hey, the power state value, that property, that top level property, has to be equal to powered on. Then we're going to store that into our VM variable, or our get stat again. And then, you know, as you notice, we're just doing the one top level get stat, and then doing our for each loop against everything that's been returned. All right, so switching this up a little bit, so we're gonna move over and look at not just VMs, but the hard disks themselves. So in this situation, we're going to be looking for the VM name, essentially, the name of the hard disk, as well as the canonical name, which is going to require us, as we can see here, to dig through and do a data store, or a get data store commandlet usage, and then modify the information using the split method. We're just doing get VM, piping that into get hard disk, and then from there, selecting out the VM name, the name of the hard disk, and the canonical name. But we can do this more streamlined, make it a little more readable, and, you know, furthermore, doing less calls to get data store. So here on the first line, we're going to use the DS tab variable and create an array-based item, an object. For that, we're going to do get data store, and for each one of those, we're going to put specific information into our array, or in this case, we're going to use a hash table. Yeah, sorry, that's a hash table, not an array. Then down there at the bottom, we're going to do our get VM, we're going to do our get hard disk, and then instead of having to do get data store each and every single time for each and every single hard disk that we have in our environment, we're now just going to pull against that hash table instead. So again, we're only making one call for get data store, and then we're referring against our hash table. So a whole, you know, more streamlined, less calls to our data store objects, and it's more readable than the last screen was. All right, now here's a little tidbit on making better usage of PowerShell itself. So it was either PowerShell version 5 or maybe 5.1, but one of them actually started using methods at the object level, which is kind of cool. It's something that you know, if you interact with the API through the WebView or extension data through PowerCLI, those have been there for a while. But with the new way that PowerShell has added it, this is essentially, in our example here, like doing where object, except it's actually faster. And I have to give credit to Luke Deakins on this one, because he was the one who pointed this one out. And he said he found it buried in the release notes of all places. So kind of cool. So in this example here, we're taking our get VM. We're going to filter through and filter out only the VMs that are powered on. Now the newer method that's displayed here is just doing putting parentheses around our get VM, then doing a .where. So that's just calling out the where method, and then stating our script block of what it needs to validate. And depending on your environment, I found this to be about 30% faster than just a specific or a straight where object. So that's pretty impressive, really. That even PowerShell's, you know, getting better on its core functionality. Then they also have a couple other ones. So for each is there, and pulling out just like the name property, those are also there as well. And here actually shows that says that the filtering out or returning back the output of names of specific properties has been there since version 4. So that's kind of cool. And then the last one is something that's really cool that I had to try it myself because I didn't actually believe that it would work. But this was another one that Luke B gets all the credit for, where we're using the where method again, and this time we're filtering based on our script block there, saying, you know, if the object has a power state property that's equal to powered on, we're going to return that. However, in this case, they have an additional property that's available, or I'm sorry, additional parameter that's available. In this case, it's called split. So it's going to return back VM objects in this case, you know, regardless. So if it's powered on, it's going to return those in the first set. If it's powered off, it's going to return those in a second set. And we can separate these out by the two variables that's there to the left-hand side. So we have our VM on and our VM off. So this actually consolidates our calls. In this case, you know, the use case is going through and, you know, obtaining a list of powered on VMs and powered off VMs. This consolidates that call into one. So that's pretty fantastic there. So not only is it faster, but we're reducing our calls from, you know, probably 2 down to 1. So going back into our vSphere objects, you know, there's 2 main ways to get information about VM-based objects. So we'll get down to those vSphere objects. So the first one is doing the get VM and then interacting with the extension data. The other type is to do get view, and since we're working with a VM in the first value there, we're going to use a view type of virtual machine, and then we can filter that based on whatever name that we're looking for. In this case, we're looking for whatever. So those are the 2 ways to get to our vSphere objects. But there are ways to make get view faster, to make the responses faster and make them better for your, or more optimized for your scripts. You know, because for a while, get view was the main way of, like, hey, if you want to make your stuff faster, start using get view. However, the PowerCLI engineers, you know, they got a little upset about that, and they've been doing a lot of performance improvements. And let's see, it was get VM was updated, I think it's 6.5.1, and it was made almost 40% faster than prior iterations. So that was pretty fantastic in terms of a performance increase. But, you know, we can still squeeze out some more performance out of get view. So our basic format that we're looking at here is just get view and then specifying the view type. So in this case, we're switching it from virtual machine to host system. But to make this a little faster, we can limit what's being returned. So we're going to make use of splatting here, which is generally a hash table where we're saying that for the view type parameter, we're looking for host system, you know, just like on the screen before. However, we're going to limit the properties that we want returned to be name and alarm actions enabled. You know, so if we run the line that was on the page prior, it's going to get back every single host that's in our environment, as well as every single property that's assigned to that host. So in this case, we're going to limit that down and say we only want the name and we only want alarm actions enabled. Now the last line on here is the select object. So if you do this, if you limit what's actually being returned, those properties are still there. They're just going to be null. So you're probably going to want to clean up what your output looks like. So to do that, we're just using select objects and calling out name and alarm actions enabled. However, if you've interacted with any objects, we know that certain properties can be nested. So how do we kind of interact with those? So in this case, we're going to try and pull out the UUID for the hardware. And we can do that by literally specifying out the nested property value. So in this case, it's hardware and system info, and then the UUID. And then we also probably want to update how we output that using select object with another calculated property and specifying UUID for the name in this case, and then telling it by way of an expression and a script block that we want to reference that hardware.systeminfo.uuid property that's been nested. So then that that pulls that property and makes that a top level object that's being returned. And then you can start getting even further, getting more advanced. So if you definitely want to get some more performance, pull some more performance out of your scripts, regex is definitely the place to take a look at. However, regex is also not exactly easy. It's generally something that even I avoid. So here's an example. We're going to filter out systems that include local.lab. But we're still going to pull out just those properties that were listed before. And we're going to use the $sign on this one, which is a regex operator. All right, next up, what if we only want to search for information in a specific section of our environment? So in this case, we have a lab environment that has multiple data centers. So we want to be focused on only the information, only the hosts that are included in the data center that's known as home lab. Now the search root parameter that only accepts MoRef. So it's only accepting the ID that's available as the MoRef. So you're also interacting with not the .NET object, but the vSphere object. So we can't just pull back get data center -name home lab. We actually have to specify out the .extension data and then specify the MoRef. And then we can just run everything as normal. So, we've gone from just getting information about our hosts. We've started to limit out the properties that are being returned down to the name and alarm actions enabled. And then also specifying different properties that are being that are nested within that within that vSphere object. And we're filtering it based on the name of the host system. And then furthermore, we're using the search root parameter to only specify information that's available in a specific data center. Now what happens if you're interacting with your VM? In this case, we have our VM that's named whatever, and then we're going to do a stop VM, and then we're going to do a start VM. Now with that, in general, you can just, wait, do a while loop in this case, and wait for the VM state to, I guess we're doing not equal to powered on first. So while our VM that's whatever, not equal to powered on, we're going to sleep for 5 seconds, renew the information about our VM object, because that VM object is a point in time. So it's not going to update based on what's happening in the vCenter server, because that's going to require another call to our vCenter. We have to renew that each time to make sure that we have the best information, and because otherwise our while loop here is just going to stay there in perpetuity. Let's see, this is getting into some customization here. I think I might have missed an overview slide. So in this case, we're looking at, we created a new VM. We use splatting to input all of our parameters as part of the SVM hash table there. And then we're going to wait for a specific event type that's being pulled out by get VI event. So in this case, we're taking our entity, which is our new VM object, looking for a start date of now, which is equal to get date. And then we're going to filter it and wait for event types that are not equal to customization succeeded. And then we're going to do a start sleep, and then we're going to repoll. So just continuing forward and waiting for that, that property output. Moving into another kind of concept is using try and catch blocks. So this is one specific area where, especially in my earlier days, I violated quite frequently, where I was using, you know, not the cleanest code essentially to iterate through and do some validations. So our example here is we start off with our VM name, which is going to be my VM, and then we're going to do a get VM against that. We're going to store that into the VM variable. And then in our if statement there, we're going to say if that VM variable actually exists, which means that there is a VM that's by the name of my VM, it's going to pull out the property's name and power state. However, if it doesn't return back that VM, it's going to write output, you know, back to our PowerShell session and say VM of my VM name or my VM has not been found. You know, probably not the most optimal way to do it, but you know, it works. So there's another way to do this. So instead, we can use a try catch block. So again, we're doing the same thing where we're, you know, the VM name is stored into a variable. Then we're doing that get VM and storing that into the VM variable. But the one key thing here is the error action, saying stop. So if we get an error, it's going to push us out to the catch where it's going to write out that output. So, you know, you don't have to rely on any of the, you know, the PowerShell terminal computing anything out. So it just knows automatically that it doesn't have to worry about calculating the if then or if else block of code. In this case, it's just saying, hey, try this thing. As long as it doesn't error, we're going to keep rolling through here. Oh, animations on this one. There we go. Now let's make this a little more advanced. Say, you know, we're trying to build out some VMs in our environment, or we're validating really. So in this case, we have a bunch of names that are in a vmnames.txt file. So we're going to use the PowerShell commandlet get content, which is going to pull in all the information that's in that vmnames text file. And then for each one of those lines that it's imported, we're going to use our try catch. And it's going to say, you know, get VM of name, which is the last value in the for each loop. And if it doesn't exist, in this case, you know, if we receive back an error, it's going to create that new VM. You know, so that's a pretty clean way of going through and iterating through a list of VM names instead of having to do if-else statements. Oh, more animations. Now, the one key thing that we're highlighting here in our bottom red box here is that because of how the $_ variable works, the value for that actually changed in this case. So if you hit that catch block, it's going to be the error output from the prior line. There we go. So instead of creating a new VM with the value out of the VM name.txt, it's going to say, hey, you know, we can't create a VM that's of this error type. So for that, we can correct that by declaring our variable name. So instead of using $undersign or $_, we're going to do a for each loop and specifying that for each line in that VM name text file, we're going to use what's known as the $VM name. And that variable can be whatever you want to. You know, a lot of people use $I, but if you want to make sure that your code is, you know, commented and clean, you should probably give it something that makes sense. So in this example, we're using $VM name. So then, if we have some kind of issue in our try-catch block, it's going to output the proper information. So instead of creating a new VM, it's going to, you know, we're reverting back to our right output, saying, you know, VM of our VM name variable not found. And then I think this is the last thing that I have to cover. And this is a big one that came out right before VMworld. And if anybody in the audience is familiar with a prior VMware Fling known as Onyx, this is the next generation of that. So this is basically a feature, a utility that has been added to the HTML5 web client Fling, where you can hit this little red button that's on the screen there, and it will record your actions as you perform them in the web client. And then once you're done, you hit that little red record button again, and it's going to take you to the screen that we're on here. And it's going to give you how you can regenerate the tasks that you performed in the UI, how you can do those in code. So if you can see the screen there adequately enough, the bottom line, or rather line 20 on here, it's using the shutdown guest method. Basically, it's going to shut down a virtual machine. So if you're reading that, you probably can notice something, that we're not using one of what's known as our high-level commandlets. So it's not using shutdown VM guest. It's using and interacting with our vSphere object and using a method that's available at the API level. So this isn't specifically PowerCLI, but this is the underlying interaction with the API itself. So, you know, at this point, I wouldn't say that this is something that would be a great utility for beginners, but this is certainly something that would be very valuable in those situations where you can't figure out how to automate something, or you can do something in the UI, but you can't really quite figure it out using PowerCLI. This is going to be a fantastic utility for that. And currently, again, it's available only as part of the vSphere HTML5 web client Fling. And I should also note that it only currently supports vSphere 6.5. And then let's see, I should have a demo here. Let's see how the demo works over Zoom. Hey, there we go. All right, so there we're in our HTML5 client. We can see our little red button. We've clicked on it. We're going to go over to our app01 system, right-click it, hit shutdown guest. So it's run, it's in the process of shutting down, but we could already go through and hit the stop button, and then we see the exact same code that was on our, oh, it went away. Come back. There we go. So then it has the exact same code that we saw on the example screenshot there before. Now, some of the other cool things that you can do here is there's the copy and the download button. So you can copy the script or the output code that's been generated, put that on your clipboard, and then you can run it directly in your PowerShell terminal, assuming that you've already connected to your vCenter server. Or you can download it. So if you click on the download button, it'll download it as a PowerShell script, and then you can save it and make modifications to it, and what have you. Or you can do clear and start another, which literally, if you hit that button, it restarts the recording, so you don't have to hit the record button again. Then you can go do your tasks, hit stop, and then you're returned back where you can see the code output. So that's a really cool utility that was recently added. Like I said, it was available the Wednesday, I believe, before VMworld. So super amazing. I'm extremely happy to see that come out. And I'll be really excited to see where it goes here in the future, because we are taking a look at doing things like adding support for spitting out the code in the high-level commandlets. So instead of seeing shutdown guest and using that method, that you're using shutdown VM guest. We're also looking into generating the code in several different languages. So the big request so far has been JavaScript for anybody that's using VRO. That would be a huge thing with vRealize Orchestrator. The other big ask has been Python. So if you would like to see any other code output, please let me know, because I'll make sure that our developers have that on the radar. Oh, cool. All right, I thought I had code capture last. But let's talk about when things go wrong. So what happens if you run into an error? So like in our previous one, we're taking a look at, get VM. What happens if that VM isn't returned back? Now, what happens if you get a error message that's a little more cryptic? So this is something that Microsoft actually released. It's a function that they wrote. I believe it's available out on the PowerShell gallery. So if you don't want to copy, paste, and put it into your PowerShell session, you can also retrieve it back from there. But this is going to be one of those things that's available when you talk to VMware support. First question is going to be, what version of PowerCLI are you on? The next question is, if you're receiving an error, can you run this? So this basically dives through your error global variable and pulls out specific information. So it's kind of cool. It's very human readable. So you can probably decipher some things even before opening a support ticket. It works against things that aren't PowerCLI related. It's a PowerShell function itself. So you can use it outside of the VMware ecosystem. All right, so let's take a look at waiting. Apologies, I think my slides got a little out of order here. This should have been a little earlier. But in this case, we are looking at interacting with a VM system. So we're going to get our credential. We are going to restart VM guest, which means that we're interacting with the VMware tool and telling it to reboot. However, a follow-up task for that is that we need to interact with that guest OS, and we're going to attempt to pull out some IP information. So here we're using splatting again, and we're going to specify our VM. We're going to send it through invoke VM script, a bash script, with the script text of IP address, and then with a guest credential of our cred variable that we've already filled in. And then we're just iterating and running, or rather initializing our invoke VM script. However, if you run this as is, the VM guest could still be in the process of rebooting. So how can we validate and verify what status the VM has so that we can actually run this properly? There we go. So, if we ran this right off the bat, we get the guest operations agent could not be contacted. That's, understandable, but we want to automate this properly and make sure that we can get this information in the way that we desire. So with this, as part of VMware tools and our ability to access and interact with the guest VMware tools installation, there is what's known as a guest operations ready property. So we can interact with that and pull back the VMware tools objects. And basically, we're just going to wait until that value is set to true. Oh. Building this out a little bit. Okay, so we're running the same thing. However, we're introducing a while loop. So, essentially, we're just saying, hey, with this VM through the extension data, then looking for the guest operations ready property. If it's not set to guest operations ready, wait. It's literally as simple as that. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And that gets us right through to the point of being able to interact with that guest OS. And so, we're not wasting time on our side. We don't have to introduce, a start sleep and tell it just to, hey, wait for 5 minutes, because every system, in this case, it's probably a Linux box. Every system should be back up in 5 minutes. We can continue pulling this information to verify whether or not, it's ready for guest-based operations. Oh, however, what happens if it runs fast enough where the guest tool is running is still known as true? What happens if that reboot operation hasn't actually hit? So in this case, we're walking through the seconds of the reboot process. So for the first 5 seconds, the guest tool's running status was still set to true. So it hasn't actually rebooted until the 6th second. So, if you haven't accomplished that, it's going to go boom, and you're going to have that red error again. So what's another property that we could use instead? So there's the one that we were using. Actually, we were using the other one first. There we go. I think there's a typo there. So there's another property that's there available, and it is ready for guest operations. So it knows that even though it didn't make that into this deck for whatever reason, basically it knows that you have issued that restart guest command. So it's going to tick off the is ready for guest operations property and say no. So then it's going to know that something's ongoing, something is currently happening, something is currently being processed on this VM object. So don't run anything, don't run something else. Then once it reboots, once the VMware Tools goes offline, once it comes back up online, once VMware Tools is operating correctly again, where it's up and running and you can connect to it, that value is going to be reset. So then it will, you can interact with it again. So apologies for the typo on this one. All right, so here's the last thing that I have to cover. I promise on that one. I know this is absolutely my my last slide here. So some things to keep in mind as you're going through the process of learning and getting exposure to PowerCLI. Absolutely, positively make use of the community. The PowerCLI community is amazing. I really can't say enough good things about the community. If you go to that top link that's up there, it's vmware.com/go/PowerCLI. That takes you to the VM forum. Luke Deacons is out there. The guy is amazing. He can answer questions with code samples faster than I can generally read through the questions themselves. So he's literally a one-man army that's out there. He's fantastic. And there's also the VMware Code Slack group. So if Slack is kind of more your speed, Highly recommend joining that Slack group. I believe we're up over 800 members. As of either during VMworld or right before VMworld. So, the VMware Code Slack itself has somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 members, and almost 1,000 of them have joined the PowerCLI channel. So that's pretty fantastic. There's a lot of really cool information that's being shared in there, a lot of projects, discussions, a lot of troubleshooting, things of that nature, some great minds that are in there. So highly recommend that. If you're creating samples, if you're searching for samples, make use of the PowerCLI community repo. This is something that's out there and on the VMware GitHub page. There are some modules that are out there that folks like our engineering teams and William Lamb and Alan Renouf and those folks have created. The Horizon View or HV Helper module that interacts with the Horizon View 7.0.1 and above APIs. Fantastic example, something that some of our engineers created, and then the community has really taken over and made a ton better. There's a VMware Cloud on AWS module that's out there too that helps interact with those APIs. There are scripts, there are a couple other resources. We've had over 500 different commits. I believe we're up over 50 contributors now too, which is also super impressive. So that's awesome. There's the VMware Code Sample Exchange. So, if maybe, even if you're there tonight and, PowerCLI isn't your thing, the VMware Code Sample Exchange has Python, has Ruby, has all kinds of different languages and samples that have been created and added out there. And if you want to share something back, it has GitHub integration. So, it's super simple to share that back. Again, I can't talk about the hands-on labs enough. Especially if you don't have a development environment, or especially if you want to do something that's, particularly dangerous or, could have a pretty severe impact. Those are fantastic because, literally they're non-persistent. And, if you leave, if you, drop from the lab, it's going to decommission itself. And then you can always come back at any point in time and stand up a new lab. And then lastly, this is a cool thing that's come up here recently. Jake Robinson, the product manager for PowerCLI, released at VMworld last year. However, it's gotten a lot of traction here lately. And that's what's known as the PowerCLI feature requests site. And that's at powercli.ideas.aha.io. And we've had all kinds of folks that are coming out there and sharing their feature requests, and it helps us on the product side, because you can also vote for some of these features. So code capture, the new version of Onyx, for a long time, it was actually it still may be the most popular feature request that's out there. But that really helps us show that this is what the community wants. This is what the folks who are using PowerCLI are really looking for. So that's a great way to provide feedback to us in a pretty streamlined fashion, and instead of reaching out to me by Twitter or email or anything like that, and hoping I don't forget. So with that, that's all I have. If anybody has questions or comments or anything like that, feel free to figure out where the mic is, or you can always reach out to me on Twitter or what have you there.
Is it on? Kyle, are we going to have access to your slide deck?
Yes, I will absolutely share the slide deck, and I will make sure that it's updated before I send it out.
Okay. And just so you all know, this is also being recorded, so we will be uploading it to our YouTube channel. So as soon as I can get it edited, all the dead space. But anybody have any questions? None at all.
Wow.
Kyle's the one to ask. He is that good.
I either did an amazing job or I did a terrible job. I can't tell which way. I'll lean towards the fantastic, towards the fabulous job.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, with that, thank you all very much. I'll turn it back over to David, and feel free to reach out to me if you come up with anything after the fact. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks again, Kyle. All right. Well, I'm going to switch to this mic. I'm going to hold the other one. I might as well hold this. I don't think I have any more slides to bring up. Yeah. So we have the drawings we're going to do here in just a couple of minutes or just a moment. And I should have had the iPad ready for that. But just a couple of reminders about our next meeting, October 17th, is that what it was? Third Wednesday in October. And we'll have to come up with a topic for that. So just a second to get this pulled up. And I would put it on the screen, but I was having some issues earlier trying to figure that out because it's on its own Wi-Fi network. And yeah, it just didn't work well. All right. Somebody want to help me with the prizes? We'll do the speaker last. So, shirts. We're at insulated tumbler. Yeah, I'll hold on to that for now. We'll get this out later or some other time. But, all right. What are we starting with? Sure. All right. You'll have your choice of one of the shirts. So. All right. The first one is Jeremy Becker.
No, that one's an extra large, please. That one's an extra large. I got this as an extra large too.
Thank you.
Okay. And next we have Adam Pryor.
Yeah, extra large, and large.
Okay. And next we have Devin Tilley. It's not stacked, really.
No, I got extra large, sorry.
Hmm.
Very well.
Either one.
All right, we'll go down.
All right. And Tim Gray.
Okay, so I started the wrong page.
All right.
Let's let it back.
Yeah, there we go. We can do inside bag next. That's fine. Okay.
All right, here, we'll do either or. How's that?
Yep, you get a choice of those two. Right, Josh Scotts.
Let's let it. You can take a total of last night, too. No.
And Bishop. We're moving from table to table. All right.
And the big VMware.
And the last one, we're going to do the VMware bag.
Or couch or whatever it is.
And John. So we have most of the tables, sorry. All right.
Glass posters,
Yeah, we do it. We have the PowerCLI posters over there. We have pop sockets, stickers, guides from our other meetings we had, which the videos for the first two have been uploaded. The other one I've downloaded it. I just haven't got it edited yet. I'll try to do that tonight. But there's lots of guides that go through. Some of the things that Kyle went through tonight are on there. Some go all the way down to the basics of PowerShell, like what it is, what kind of the history of it, and on up. And they're also on our community page if there's none over there and you want to download one. All right. However, do you want me to run it through mine, or do you want to do it? Do you have a?
I haven't been able to. I don't know how to see it.
That's not good. Leaders on.
Yes, there will be.
Oh.
All right. Let me reset flags. Okay, so that puts everybody back in. And Gordon Londini, that's pronounced right? All right. All right, Gordon over here. Okay. Yeah. We didn't have any music for that. No. Dun, da, da, da. No, sorry. All right, that's all we have for tonight. Unless anybody has any questions or anything you want to bring up? Nope. Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
Oh, yes, thanks to our sponsors again, sorry.
No, thank
Don't want to forget Rubrik. Yeah, we can't do what we do without our sponsors, and we appreciate it. So.